This is RF from the Country Lunch Show on WOOL 91.5 FM. Let's get back with part three of our February 19th, 2020 interview. I'm back in the studio here with Paleo Mountain Man and Budcat 7. And we were talking about, what were we talking about? Talking about watching the movies in the sky, what that was like back then, I think,
Right.
rather than TVs. And I do know to keep up with it because we are such in our like little dome that we live in today, like you were saying, light pollution and all that, why we can't see too far into space. There is an app out there called Skywalk 2. If you can get that on your cell phone, you can aim that anywhere in the sky and see all the activity that's going on in the sky. And if you aim it towards Earth, you can see where all the activity where you're at, because there are so many, I guess, telecommunications things working out there these days. You should look into it. It's called Skywalk 2. And you can even click on all the little objects that you see on there, and it'll tell you what it is and what it's doing. So in case you can't open your eyes like they did back in the megalithic times, we have devices today that do that, right?
That's right.
That's right.
Right.
So
Right.
and you never know what type of a mind they had. I mean, we do it through our TVs and radios and cell phones and walkie-talkies. How did they? What? I can imagine being that clairvoyant and being that exposed to the universe. I don't think I can imagine what thoughts went through their minds, but I know it's in your walls. I know it's in
Yeah.
the walls that you
Yeah.
study.
Yeah.
And all the artifacts they left and the images they made. And you know they created art from the carvings they left. So they were
And the
imagining
effigy.
things bigger than themselves. And when you look up at the sky, if you're just sitting there in your hunter-gatherer little positions there around your campfire or whatever, but you look up at the sky, you see something bigger than yourself, and you wonder, and wonder is a big power. And that's why they built walls, so they could look at the sky more. And they told their stories, and they were people that looked up and saw these things, and they changed their way of being because they saw the beauty, and they tried to describe it in the way they carved their stones and built their walls and made their societies.
I wasn't thinking that way. I was thinking like we wonder because we are so under the dome where they may have been on. They may not have had to wonder. They might have known what was going on out there.
They
and
might have. They
who-
might have.
Who to communicate and what activity was actually happening out there.
It's interesting that you guys say these sort of things because that's all part of this research, okay? Getting, as being sort of a forensic scientist looking at these things, right? You're trying to get into the head, into the mindset of these ancient people. So that's all an intrinsic part of this sort of research is trying to get inside the heads of these people who existed back then. It's hard to do. I mean, obviously, because the world was such a different place. So it's hard for us to relate to that because we don't have that today. Our society is, much more complex and convoluted, et cetera, et cetera. But again, as I said, and like what Al's saying and what Jimmy is saying, when Jimmy describes all of these things, this is part of the research here, sort of getting into the mindset, getting into the heads of these people. What did they think? What did they see? What was going on with them? It's all part of the sort of anthropological research that Jimmy and I are doing in this field of work. So it's very interesting to try to put yourselves into that civilization, into the mindset, into the heads of these people. So it's part of it, and that's why we throw so many ideas out there, because some of it is not so clear. It's not so obvious what they're doing. But I was thinking it's very interesting to just understand what's going on here. It's sort of different here in the northeastern part of North America than anywhere around the world, and I think that a lot of the anthropological and archaeological research that's done here is suppressed or either downplayed in a lot of ways because whereas the rest of the world shows a sort of progression from primitive times, up to modern times. There's always this progression going on. But here in the Americas, especially here in the northeastern part of America, we don't see a progression. We see actually a devolution. See, that's the problem that they have here in the Americas, where you have these people of more advanced culture, let's say, like the Adena and the Hopewell, these giants or large hominids that had existed here at some period before the native peoples were here, had a very advanced culture and very advanced astronomy, very advanced engineering. They also had a clear writing system, as evidenced by some of the clay tablets that are dug out of the mounds in the middle of the country, and the coins that they often found. They find these large copper coins, and seems to be evidence of some sort of monetary system that they had back there, where the coins have some sort of depictions and writings, hieroglyphics on them, et cetera, but yet, when we get into the native people's cultures later on, at some point after this, millennia after this, they didn't carry along all of those traditions, the engineering traditions, even the astronomical knowledge. They didn't carry much of that. They carried some of it through their stories and mythologies, but they weren't actively doing it. They weren't actively creating earthworks or building stone walls or effigies or mounds or anything. So the problem here for archaeologists and anthropologists is that whereas the rest of the world shows this sort of gradual progression into modern times, we have this thing going on here in the Americas that shows some sort of devolution. And they can't explain that. So obviously you would think that the native peoples, if they had some direct connection to these archaic people who were building all of these things and had advanced knowledge of astronomy and other things, they didn't carry on any of those traditions. Well, if they're directly related to these people, then why was that? Why did that happen? Obviously, if you had some advances in your culture, you would want to carry that on into the future, as we see in the rest of the world. But for some reason here in the Northeast, and that's the reason why. What was it, Jimmy? Was it Graham Hancock who said that if we were to unlock the secrets of what was going on here in the northeastern part of the America, we could unlock all the secrets of the past. You see, so
I think he said that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I agree with him also.
We don't see a progression into the later peoples, into the native peoples from these archaic people. We see some sort of devolution. So that's a difficult thing for anthropologists and archaeologists to explain. Whereas the situation in the rest of the world is quite different. It's always this steady progression upward. So this is part of the mystery of the past here in North America, and it's not so easy to discern. So again, sort of getting into the heads, getting into the mindset of these people in their everyday lives, whatever occurred during their everyday lives, is all part of this research. And Jimmy and I are pretty much, some of the people at the forefront at trying to decipher and, trying to get into the heads of these people and what they were thinking about at the time that they constructed the stone wall.
I'm sure they were more of an advanced civilization than we are today, for one reason. History, records wiping out the Indians and whatever. I mean, these people, you're talking about half-naked people walking around the planet, like the Garden of Eden, right? There's no electronics, no cars, no buses. Nobody's going to hassle them, and there's male and female, and it's beyond what's happening today. So I'm not going to call them primitives at all. I'm going to say that they were an advanced civilization in the Garden of Eden until the population grew, and here we are.
It's like the same idea is there's less light, so you can see the heavens better. There's more silence. There's less everything going
Distracting.
on, and you
There's
can
less
actually think
distraction,
about.
you know.
You can clear your mind and maybe go into one of those chambers and sit there for 3 days and come out a different person. I mean, that's part of what they were doing. The silence was part of an experience they had. The same as looking at the stars and not seeing light shine it out. Like you said, it's easier to see the sky back then than it is today. It was easier to hear yourself back then also. And they did have spiritual experiences, and they show that in their artifacts and in the walls, and they saw beauty where it is. And a lot of their sculptures of their portraits are looking up. Their head is tilted upwards, looking up. And that means
To the
something.
sky.
That's
To the
looking up.
sky, yeah.
And that means a lot because they did it a lot. And they did a lot of other things with images, but that was one of them that you see through it all. There were serpents through them all and birds through them all and all kinds of imagery, but that's one of the things you'll find that's through all of this. And the serpentry is it's also connected to the sky, but it's also connected to the earth. And it's all this wisdom that they collected throughout the ages runs through the serpent. And they put it in their buildings, their special buildings,
put it in their
like their
walls.
walls. Exactly.
They put it in their walls.
They put their history in
The evidence
it.
is there, and Jimmy and I were the one and only people to identify all the walls as being serpents, and this cosmic serpent is all part of the mythology and archaeology of the past and the astronomy that these people were involved with. As you say, there was no TV, no radio, no books, so this is what they were watching. They were watching the skies, and it's hardly surprising that when you see people, effigies and sculptures of somebody looking up to the skies.
And communicating with a higher deity that is that clairvoyant.
That's right.
Well, who's to say that the universe doesn't have a consciousness?
That's what I'm talking. Yes, it's alive.
And anything has a consciousness. They can't figure out what makes us conscious. We just have a bunch of inert chemical materials that comprise our brain. So what gives rise to consciousness?
We're talking to ourselves and our siblings, right? But they were talking to something that was very clear to them, which we can't see today. And
But you can see it.
well, as clearly, I don't see it as clearly.
You do what they did also is if you close your eyes, you have your third eye. And that's where
Right.
you connect with what they were doing. And that's how you understand temporally what they were doing. If you're on the if you stand on the same place they're standing, it's easier to understand what they were about. If you're standing way over here and they're standing way over there, your perspective doesn't really meet them, so you're putting your perspective on them. You have to empathize with them by standing where they were standing. And a lot of this is looking at the sky, and if you have to think about less light pollution, less noise pollution, a simpler life, like Dave's saying, there's none of this around. You're looking at the sky play out. Every day it's moving, it's different, it's changing, it's exciting. Maybe it was like on the Super Bowl. And there were places that you could do that. And they built places into the mountains, into the ridges, these dolmen-shaped stones that you could sit on top of and do this and sight the sky.
Observation point.
They did.
Observation point.
I know of a few of them, and that's exactly what they are. And I only know this intuitively because that's what I would do. If I was sitting on that, I'd watch the sky. You can't help it because that's where they are. They're placed right where you have to watch the sky and the horizon and the things going on. He gives you a perfect view. And who would move a multi-ton stone in the right spot to do the right thing for any other reason? It's intuitive. That's how you figure these things out. You sit where they sat, and you can understand why they did things. And it's usually the simplest thing. The first thing you think about, you start there because it's usually the simplest thing. What would I do? Well, I'd sit here and watch the stars. Right. And then you start thinking about, well, there was less light pollution. I could see a better sky. I believe the sky, maybe the planets are beings, are gods, are things, or, whatever. We're having experiences, and it's all alive, and it's all the same thing. If you look your head up, if you turn your head to the sky or anything higher than you, you'll start creating beauty, and you'll build it into your walls. You'll build it into your stories. You'll build it into your artwork and your life, and you'll geoform the land to make it look better. And that's what they did.
To find out more about stone walls, go to YouTube and check out Paleo Mountain Man or Stonewall Research, Budcat 7.